When Gascoigne arrived in Yarnum, the city was a beacon of hope, a Victorian metropolis draped in Gothic architecture. The seed for Yarnum's prosperity was planted by the Healing Church and bloomed to amass a great deal of influence. Over time, the church's renown would attract desperate souls from around the world in search of a miracle. From crypts buried beneath the holy cathedrals, the old blood was scavenged out of the ruins of an ancient race. Transfusion of the old blood not only cured fatal injuries and disease, but it also granted superhuman strength and speed. Realizing its potential, the church cautiously guarded all supply and distribution of the elixir. However, behind the facade of salvation, ordained clerics hid a sinister truth under the guise of a miracle. Far from a divine cure, blood ministration morphed the patient's body and mind into a primal state, into beasthood. Unable to feign ignorance as the affliction spread, skilled mercenaries were enlisted to slaughter the infected. Under the guise of holy clerics, hunters such as Gascoigne were authorized to carry out killing sprees in an effort to purge the city. Instead of halting blood ministration, the church gave in to greed and started a cycle of corruption where citizens embraced a descent into barbarity. Eventually, Gascoigne would retire his garb and lay down his weapons for the company of a beloved wife and father 2 daughters. Although his scars would heal, the former cleric would never know peace, as his blood had been tainted after countless nights of the hunt. Polluted by the miracle which kept him alive, Gascoigne would suffer from fits of rage, consumed by bloodlust, and unable to escape his past. In order to console the surges of hysteria, his wife would play a melancholic tune that reminded Gascoigne of his humanity, of his commemoration to their love. Unfortunately, when we encounter the infamous father, it's too late. He is but a shadow of himself. As he frantically hacks away at corpses, incoherent and intoxicated by bloodlust, it's difficult to distinguish between the former hunter and beast. Once we end his suffering, in a fleeting moment where Gascoigne's humanity flickers back to life, a whispered plea for forgiveness escapes his lips. On a desolate rooftop nearby lies the lifeless body of his beloved wife, torn to shreds, a testimony of his descent into madness.
I once knew a nigga whose real name was William. His primary concern was making $1 million, being the illest hustler that the world ever seen. He used to fuck movie stars and sniff coke in his dreams. A corrupted young mind at the age of 13. Nigga never had a father and his mom was a fiend. She put the pipe down, but for every year she was sober. Her son's heart simultaneously grew colder. He started hanging out, selling bags in the projects, checking the young chicks looking for hit-and-run prospects. He was fascinated by material objects, but he understood money never bought respect. He built a reputation.
Battered by poverty and neglect, Billy grew up devoid of guidance. So he internalized the values of his environment, of a culture that glamorized money and sex as the pinnacle. Lacking discernment and desperate for approval, Billy saw crime as the lone glimmer of light within a desolate circumstance. Reasonably, he clung on to this tiny bedrock of hope and fueled it with his greed.
insecurities on other people. He fiended for props like addicts with pipes and needles, and so he felt he had to prove to everyone he was evil. A feeble-minded young man with infinite potential, the product of a ghetto-bred capitalistic mental. Coincidentally, dropped out of school to sell weed, dancing with the devil, smoked until his eyes would bleed. But he was sick of selling trees and gave in to his greed.
In pursuit of a Scarface fantasy, Billy succumbed to the allure of wealth and power as he graduated from peddling marijuana to crack cocaine, preying on the suffering of people no different than his own mother. Desperate to atone for the neglect of his childhood, Billy yearned for acceptance from men who were idolized in the streets. However, the thugs he had supplemented for a father figure did not respect him and disregarded him. In order to earn their esteem, he would have to prove his allegiance. But these men were not impressed by crooks who acted out of desperation or obedience. Billy had to show a propensity for violence that was intentional and vile.
So Billy started robbing niggas anything he could do to get his respect back in the eyes of his crew. Starting fights over little shit up on the block. Stepped up to selling mothers and brothers the crack rock. Working overtime, making money for the crack spot. Hit the jackpot and wanted to move up to cocaine. Fulfilling the Scarface fantasy stuck in his brain. Tired of the block niggas treating him the same. He wanted to be major like the cutthroats and the thugs. But when he tried to step to him, niggas showed him no love. They told him any motherfucking coward can sell drugs. Any bitch nigga with a gun can bust slugs. Any nigga with a red shirt can front like a blood. Even Puffy smoked the motherfucker up in the club. But only a real thug can stab someone till they die. Standing in front of them, staring straight into their eyes. Billy realized that these men were well guarded, and they wanted to test him before business started. Suggested raping a bitch to prove he was cold-hearted. So now he had a choice between going back to his life or making money with made men. Up in his sight, his dreams about cars and ice made him agree a hardcore nigga is all he ever wanted to be. And so he met them Friday night at 2:45.
So he opted to prove his devotion by kidnapping a woman in the dead of night along with his new brothers. With callous disregard for humanity, each member took turns in a ritual of violence. In the end, Billy was tasked with disposing of the witness to memorialize his initiation. As he towered over the victim, holding a gun to her head, Billy felt powerful, secure, and eager to live life like a made man. Empowered by his cruelty, he pulls back the cover that they had used to stop her from screaming and finds the face of his own mother. As their eyes lock in a silent plea, Billy is forced to confront his depravity.
His whole world stopped. He couldn't even contemplate. His corruption had successfully changed his fate. And he remembered how his mom used to come home late, working hard for nothing. Cause now what was he worth? He turned away from the woman that had once given him birth, and crying out to the sky cause he was lonely and scared. But only the devil responded cause God wasn't there. And right then he knew what it was to be empty and cold. And so he jumped off the roof and died with no soul. They say death takes you to a better place, but I doubt it. After that they killed his mother and never spoke about it. And listen, cause the story that I'm...
Although Billy's demise serves as a cautionary tale about the delusions of grandeur, the overarching theme of the song encapsulates a deeper message. Reality for impoverished children is warped by a lack of resources that cultivate a school-to-prison pipeline. A cycle that is perpetuated by social policies with profit-driven motives under the prison industrial complex. Just as the church used hunters to eliminate the afflicted, these policies rely on incarceration to combat the disparity of economic inequality and wealth distribution. Essentially, punishing crime without addressing the conditions that foster criminal tendencies. As more individuals are incarcerated, particularly fathers, they are removed from their families and communities, leaving behind a void that young men fill through gang affiliation. Ultimately, the real tragedy lies not in the individual fates of Gascoigne and Billy, but rather in the social structures that are designed to profit from their suffering.